Welcome back
Welcome back
Welcome back
to another episode of the Innovate on Purpose podcast.
hosted by Matt Mueller.
Best-selling author of The Mindful Innovator and Rethink Retail's top retail expert.
We help retail leaders find clarity so they can grow their businesses purposefully.
We will uncover mindful tips, innovative solutions, and purposeful leadership advice and strategies that you can apply immediately to your retail innovation.
Are you ready to innovate on purpose?
Hey, before we jump into the episode today, I just wanted to say thank you for hitting the play button. You being here fires me up, and I cannot wait to share with you the insights that are going to make a difference in your business. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a review so I can reach as many retail leaders as possible. They too need to hear this. Okay, let's do it. Our guest today is an inquisitive soul, walking through life with an adventurous spirit and a love for all people and all things. He was born and raised on the south side of Chicago and is very proud and loyal to the culture of his upbringing. Ray started with his career with a food broker and supported two of the largest traditional grocery retailers and dozens of bakery manufacturers. He eventually started working for food manufacturers in sales, account management, and leadership. He's currently the SVP for an artisan bread company, loves what he does, and hopes to make a difference with his company and team. Oh, and yeah, he's also a published author of a book called The Pen of an Underdog. Amazing book. Absolutely recommend it. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in a bit. But Ray, thank you for being on the show today. How are you?
Excellent, Matt. Thank you for having me. It's, I think back on how we met, how you and I met, and it was just through networking on LinkedIn. And we just started talking, and our careers were very similar in food, right? And then we started talking about innovation. And oh, by the way, we both wrote books. So small world. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Yeah, it's amazing how we kind of it was like synchronicity, right? Where we just linked up on LinkedIn and started having a conversation. And I was like, almost, I think a year now that we've been talking. And I'm so glad that we had the chance to do this together to talk more about the food industry and innovation and all those great things and also book writing as well to add to it. So a lot to cover. Like I was telling you before the show, I think we're going to have a couple. We're going to have to do like a series.
We could break it. Yeah, we'll do a series. I'm on board for that. But much to talk about, right? Our paths in food and also being authors. And I would consider myself an innovator, but, from reading your book, I feel more innovative and more mindful just from the experience of reading it. So I'm looking forward to this and many more.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, we are all innovators internally, one way or another. It might not be that you might not be creating a new concept or product that you're developing for market, but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, look at your career. I mean, you're talking about being in the food industry and working up to SVP, and I'm sure it took many different innovations for you personally to get to where you are today. That just doesn't happen by coincidence. So you are totally an innovator, and glad to have you on this to talk a little bit more about that. But I mean, let's start with the food industry. So what do you love about the food industry? Because you must, if you've been in it for this long. And how has that influenced your career trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, on a very basic level is humans have commonality, and you could take it to every side of the globe and every part, and we all like joy and happiness, self-esteem, sort of the emotional side of things. And then you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Humans need sleep, water, shelter. The most important one is food, right? And so food is life, and it's so much more than that. It's the centerpiece at dinner. It's the centerpiece at Christmas. It's the centerpiece at weddings, and it's the comfort that we need in life when life becomes difficult, right? And all those things, I mean, they lead to joy. They lead to friendships, love, family, memories. And so that's what really propelled me into the food industry is I think we all have memories of going into a grocery store with family members, whether that was your grandmother, your grandparents, your mom, your babysitter. And there's just this level of excitement and exploration in a grocery store. And so when I started in the food business, I started working for a food broker, specifically fresh perishables, in-store bakery, deli, or deli bakery. And my mother always found that to be very ironic because she would always take my sister and I and go to the corner bakery and bring home sweet goods and freshly baked bread and whatnot. So it was kind of the collision of all these worlds. And that's what kept me in the food business, is just the love for food and the love what it does to people and it does to the world. And so when I look at the trajectory of my career, it's really because of purpose and passion, right? And being a part of creating experiences for people. So that is why I just love the food industry. I just love it.
Yeah, purpose and passion. That is so important for anyone that wants to evolve in their career and find success. I mean, we can force our way through it, but if you have that purpose and passion behind it, it absolutely makes it a lot easier. And yeah, totally can relate. I mean, from the food industry myself, working in delis as a kid and moving my way up. I mean, totally, I can connect with that. And yeah, I didn't visit the deli for the first time when I worked there. I definitely did lots of grocery shops with my family, and yeah, the deli counter to get that free slice of cheese was always nice. So.
Yes, exactly. Or you can go to the bakery. Even now, it's like if you ask, and I don't know if this is like an insider trick, but if you ask the bakery associate or manager for a cookie, they'll give the kids a cookie. They'll give them a complimentary cookie. So
hopefully do it for adults too. I'm going to try it later.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm in Florida, so Publix, the big green giant down here, they absolutely will give a free cookie. So
for sure. Yeah.
South side of Chicago, I don't know so much.
That's right. Well, the South Side, it gets a bad reputation, but overall, it's a really good place. It's a good place, good families, and yeah, I hear what you're saying, though.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit more on the food industry. Tell me a little bit more about exactly what you're doing at your level at SVP and how that's relating to some of the innovation that we're seeing.
Yeah, at that level, it really comes down to being sort of, it's like an orchestra, right? There's so many moving pieces. If you think about the supply chain, right? It's long, right? For any product, sourcing, in the bread industry, we go from, flour and water, a starter, a levain, salt. So going all the way into commodities, the commodity level, it starts there. And then it goes into the production level. Then it goes into logistics and storage and moving things around. And then it's account management and selling and keeping track of it all and having access to data and working cross-functionally. And it's all these moving pieces. So at that level, it's just like being in an orchestra and just making sure that everything is in place. The plan is being executed, both in the silos, but also cross-functionally.
Yeah. There's a lot of moving pieces for sure, and supply chain is so large, especially in the grocery industry and in the food manufacturing industry. A lot of moving parts for sure.
And that's the thing that I think about mindfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is sometimes we're overstimulated. Let's be honest. As a society, as the human race evolves here, we're at the point. I don't know if we could take on any more. So we're so overstimulated by cell phones and criticism and work and data and meetings and, finding happiness and finding sleep, that every now and again, there's a necessity to find that calmness, right? To be mindful and just to avoid burnout, to be honest, right?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely need that. So what do you do to be able to command that orchestra and to make sure that you have that time to just kind of recenter yourself and connect?
Yeah, for sure. I would say throughout my career, I've always touched the line of burnout in some ways, meaning I always wanted to perform. I think I have a great work ethic, and I always touch that line. It's like I'm giving. And I realized, and I probably realized this later in my career, is that it's okay to take 10 minutes in the day. And if there's a major problem or something that really needs concentration and thinking, to take the 10 minutes and simply breathe. I find myself, Matt, sometimes not breathing. And I know that sounds pretty out there, all the way out in the galaxy, but there's just so much, literally taking a deep breath and digesting it all, and going from being overstimulated to being able to wrap your hands around things and think through the solutions. So I think honestly throughout the day and week is just to take some time and breathe, simply breathe.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and that's something that I apply as well. You have to get back just to that breath and just recenter yourself.
Yep.
Another thing too is multitasking. I think it's a myth, right?
Yep.
You really can't multitask. You can only work on one thing at a time. And you might have these three burning issues happening at the same time. You can't really do all three. So just being able to take that breath and saying, okay, what do I need to focus on? Let's prioritize these three fires. And which one do I have to put out first is so important. So you can actually focus on that one thing and get it done so you can move on to the next. Otherwise, all three are just going to keep on burning.
For sure. It's a great point. And again, I think just, looking back in our careers early on, I remember in the beginning, I'm like, I'm multitasking. This is it. This is what I read about. I'm doing it. I got all this stuff going on. I'm doing a little here and a little there, but nothing's getting finished, but I'm multitasking. And people would ask, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm multitasking. And I'm dizzy. I'm exhausted and nothing's getting done.
But I made it to my goal of multitasking.
It's a goal. Like I read about this. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. It's like when everyone's, how was your day going? Oh, it's busy. It's way too much going on. It's like a badge of honor. Like, no. I don't want that much going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about innovation. I guess I just want to back up completely and say,
Sure.
like, what is innovation to you? Because it could have so many different definitions. I'm just curious, how do you view it?
I view it as a word that nobody knows what it really means. You know what I'm saying? Is companies are always talking about innovation and how can we innovate? How can we be innovative? And they take this approach and they're not really, some companies, and in my experience, they're not really innovating. They talk about innovation, but when it comes time to have the stamina and the courage to launch a new item or to go out to market and be first, I think it gets dialed back pretty quick. So, but innovation to me, when I think of innovation in the world, right, from the very beginning, you think of things like electricity, right, and an airplane flying. And my favorite is to think about a camera, a disposable camera. If I was in California and I had to take a picture, I would have it on my film. I would then have to go to Walgreens or CVS, get it developed, and then send out the pictures. Now you could be in Spain, take a picture, send it to Florida, forward it to Colorado, send it back to Spain, on to Italy, wherever, in just seconds. So when I think of innovation, that's like, I go there. I go to Steve Jobs. I go to the iPod. I go to, now I know it's a buzzword, but artificial intelligence, machine learning, those sort of things, ChatGPT. That's where I think of innovation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are totally valid innovations, right? I mean, they absolutely have changed industries. They've changed people's lives. I mean, yeah, I could send a picture of, my son to his grandparents that live 3,000 miles away in a blink of an eye. I mean, Incredible. Is amazing. And it keeps those connections. And it's absolutely innovation, all those things that you mentioned. And I do think that there is also innovation that doesn't need to be that like highbrow and not that high level of tech, right? So it could be the simplest thing, like changing a little process in the manufacturing plant that saves the company millions of dollars, or makes the lives better of the employees in the plant. It's always little things that also could be innovation. So it's like, just creating that change that's going to improve is really, something that is, I think, a key piece of foundation to innovation.
So is there, because I always land on this, is like innovation, this thing that's generally accepted, but then there could be sections of innovation, right? There could be, for one company, internal innovation, where
Mm-hmm.
let's take a cake company, for example. A cake company, since their inception, has been making rectangular or square cakes, right? And then one day, although the market has round cakes or layered cakes, they decide that they were going to invest in round cakes. Now, is that considered innovation?
That is a great question, and I am tempted to say no, absolutely not. But did that roundness change anything that improved the process? Right? Did it
Okay.
save
Yeah.
them? Did they have a machine that makes it more efficient for round cakes to be pushed out of the plant 10 times faster? Well, then, heck yeah, that's an innovation. But
Yep.
just simply being round instead of square or rectangular, absolutely not. And yes, I think you're right. Like a lot of times, especially in the food industry, uh, we have so many new products coming out, these new innovations. But really, can they all be innovations? Because you took a candy bar that was just like peanuts and you put chocolate on top of it,
Mm-hmm.
that's not an innovation. No, but it's a new product. But we would be very quickly, to say, hey, this is innovation.
Yes. Yep. Because and that's what I'm sort of learning now, Matt. And again, I've that is my definition of innovation before I read The Mindful Innovator, right? Because what's included in that is also process, right? And so then that becomes my old version is like, okay, if it's innovative, it has to be innovative to the world, to the market, not just internally. But process is a very internal thing within an organization. And so
Mhm.
innovation could happen within process. And being in the food industry, I always look, okay, how do you innovate a croissant? How do you innovate a croissant? And I always struggle with that. It's like, okay, well, some people will say an all butter croissant, a chocolate croissant, a almond croissant, right? And I always struggled with that. I did is to understand if that's innovative, because when you take the croissant and you put it next to an iPod and you start talking about innovation, it's sort of my I could not comprehend, right?
Well, first off, I got to say, I take the croissant over the iPod every single day.
Well, put it this way: the croissant is still around.
That's a good
The
point. Yeah.
croissant is still around.
Well, and you can't innovate perfection. I mean,
That's
seriously.
right. Yeah, laminated dough at its finest. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so when we think about like the food industry and innovation, and we're talking about like, okay, what is innovative, what is not? Like, what are you seeing in the food industry that is innovative these days?
Mostly I would say internal innovation, where somebody
Mm-hmm.
is shifting flavors. Also, there was an era where everybody was trying to find the superfood, right? What was the next superfood? It started with kind of kale and went on to like anything that was high in antioxidants, whether it was found deep in the rainforest. How do you take that, or even local fruits like what is it in like Idaho, the boysenberry, if that's
Mm-hmm.
right, if I said it right, the boysenberry. And it's like you find these flavors, and then they become innovative because they're new ideas, right? They're new
Mm-hmm.
ideas. But I always did feel in food, at least in the in-store bakery, it was innovation was always based on shapes and flavors, and then eventually packaging, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a packaging out there that could increase shelf life, or it had a secondary use, after you transported your cake home, if you could restore it again, or if you could use it for a third purpose. So I've seen it that way, and I've also seen sort of the adaptation to consumer preferences, right? Food allergens is the main one.
Mm-hmm.
Is all of a sudden we've realized that 1 in 133 Americans have celiac disease, right? So we've seen an influx of gluten-free cuisine and foods come into the market. And then we've seen all our other allergens come in, that changed the process. Peanut allergens, all the way up to dairy and soy and now sesame seeds. So I think it's continually evolving. But I've seen a lot of changes in process. And especially with gluten-free, because from a manufacturing side, if you have a gluten-free item, you either have to isolate that production or you have to ensure there's no cross contamination with an extra step in the process to cleanse the equipment and completely isolate it from the rest of the facility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you kind of like went through the full gamut there, and I see like a whole skew of different types of innovation, right? So where it's like you start off with shapes,
Yep.
so back to shape and size, like is that
Right, shape
really
and size, yeah.
innovation? And then you worked all your way to like to new ingredients and new flavors that are meeting consumer needs. And I think that's a key point there that you make is that it's that consumer need that is so important for the industry. Like it has to evolve, and no matter what industry, when we think about innovation, it's evolving to the consumer at the end of the day,
Yep.
and also creating better processes for our business. This way, we have a better bottom line, and that better bottom line will help us actually innovate even more. So
Yep.
there's like that extra benefit there. But I would love to talk just a little bit more about like consumer needs, and what are you seeing as some rising consumer needs?
Yeah, for sure. I always like to start out almost with a joke is um, the first days of Uber, right? The first days of Uber, for the public to conceptualize the idea that a stranger is going to pick them up, is going to pull up in front of your house, you're going to get in their car, and you're going to go. And that leads, so even on the food side, like Instacart, right? Instacart, somebody's going to go out there and pick your pears and, all that
No
stuff
way.
and deliver it to your house, right? And it's sort of that life cycle, right? The early adopters are coming in, they're accepting it, and then eventually it catches on. And now when I think of innovation, it's like, okay, at one point in time we were there, now we're here, apply some innovation. What does the future look like, right? What does the future look like for invention, for process, for new ideas? And you never want to go too far, right? I always use the example is I have a great idea. It's a dinner roll and it's turmeric and dragon fruit flavored. It's sliced vertically and horizontally, and it's awesome. We plugged in all of our innovation to this, and then it sits on the shelf, and everyone's like, "Man, that is so cool." I'm not going to buy it, but that is awesome, right? And so sometimes I think of innovation and not overshooting the mark, right? Which as an innovator, I think it's best to overshoot the mark and then pull it back a little bit
Yeah.
before going to market.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's the way I kind of describe it. It's like you take a moonshot. So that moonshot is taking a huge leap into this crazy idea that's dragon fruit turmeric dinner roll, and that's the moon. And then we're going to shoot for that. So we're going to build a rocket, we're going to fuel it up, and we're going to launch off, and we're going to hope that we had the right formulas and the right amount of fuel in this thing to get there.
Yeah.
That's one way to get to the moon. But I think there's a second way, and that second way is to build a staircase to it. So I think that's what you were talking about, Ray, where it's like you start to build, okay, what are the steps that lead you to the moon? So this way it's like you get a staircase and say, okay, I'm going to do this dragon fruit turmeric dinner roll. But you know what? I'm only going to do the turmeric first and see how that goes. Then I'm going to add the dragon fruit, or I'm going to do it separately. I'm going to do the dragon fruit separately. Then I'm going to mash them together. And I'm going to do all these steps to get people to the point of where this makes sense. So it's more likelihood that you can get to the moon when you put a strategic plan together at each of those steps along the way to lay it out.
And this is what I'm talking about. These are the things, because you see, sometimes I'm out there a little bit. And when I read The Mindful Innovator, it all really hit home and made sense to me, right? I started realizing what real innovation is, and my idea of innovation was a little off, right? Especially for the food industry. My expectations were out of this world. And now I've really grasped the idea of, being mindful and tying that into innovation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was the same place with you, Ray. I mean, when I first started innovating within the food space, I mean, I was thinking about those same things: robots and lasers, AI, all that good stuff. And how am I going to apply this to my business? And one thing after the other failed. until it was when I went back to those early day innovations like you talked about, right? Or how electricity, the wheel, fire, how was this all invented? Like, how exactly did we get there? And that's when we
Yeah.
realized that formula of it's these three simple things that are all based on real problems, creating change that improves it, and then getting others to accept it. And kind of that's what we're talking about here is getting people to accept this crazy dinner roll. It's got to
Yeah.
build
Yeah.
those steps to get there, to get that acceptance in.
And now, Matt, I'm not sure if I answered your question correctly there or not. I kind of
We got off on a tangent, and I was going to circle back to it, but consumer needs.
yes,
So,
consumer
what are the
needs.
consumer needs that you're seeing that are like, and I guess we could put this on that curve that you were talking about. We have early adopters, and then we have, the new people that get into it, and then the ones that are late adopters. But like, if we look at the center of that bell curve, what is right now like just getting ready to pop off and be really popular?
Yeah, for sure. I think the consumer, especially when it comes to consuming food, is again overstimulated with information, but also in a good way, right? I think the way people used to eat, like I know, like when I ate as a child, my mom would make me a full breakfast, I would have a full lunch, I would have a full dinner, and probably snacks in between. Probably too much food, right? And so I think the consumer is really, over the past, I would say 10 years, has really been reading labels. What's in it, nutrition, sodium, trans fats. I know trans fats have been eliminated, but saturated fat, total fat, added sugar. So I think the consumer is on their everyday meals, they're looking for more nutrition based foods, more lifestyle based foods. But then at the same time, there's always that indulgent side, right? Where somebody's like, okay, you know what? I have a cheat day. I've been good all week. Today's my cheat day. I'm going all in, and it doesn't matter. And I always felt that's where the in-store bakery came into play, right? Is, you could shop for your food and produce and center aisle, but when you wanted that real indulgent sort of made in store, freshly made, you go to the in-store bakery. We've also seen on the bread side, right? At one point in time, and this is kind of that's like the consumer side as patterns shift and eating habits shift. But then there also has to be that win-win scenario where the retailer is really concerned about labor hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take even a loaf of bread, so if there was a scratch bakery in the in-store bakery, and they have flour and water, and they're mixing, and they have to proof overnight, and then they have to bake, and then there has to be consistency in the bake. There's shortcuts that have been implemented where products are almost fully finished, partially baked or par baked,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's no mixing. The labor is very simple, and the customer still gets the same satisfaction. So the customer goes into an in-store bakery, they smell fresh bread, they smell fresh cookies, fresh muffins. They're not necessarily being mixed, and all the ingredients aren't being inventoried in the fridge or in store. It's coming from a place that the shortcut has been created. So it's kind of in the industry right now, it's finding the shortcut for what the consumer wants, controlling labor, and making everybody happy.
That's a great way to look at it. And like, as you're talking about it, Ray, I'm picturing in my head like a Venn diagram, a three-way Venn diagram. Like, here's the company that, the manufacturer. And then overlaid on that is the consumer. This is what they want. And then overlaid on that, on the other side is, the retailer, right? So, and you have to think about what lays in the center. And that's where your innovation is. Like, it's not going to be this, amazing chocolate covered bread that you make scratch in the bakery department every single day or every single hour, because the retail is never going to support that. Might be what the consumer wants. They ain't getting it. So you have to figure out what is that middle ground to make all three. And of course, for the company, for the manufacturer, you have to think about cost as well. And are they going to turn a profit on it? Because they're not there just to satisfy consumers or satisfy retailers. They're there for business too. So the innovation lies when you put all those diagrams together and say, okay, here in the center, boom, this is where we need to go.
Yes. And the biggest thing there, in what I took away from the Mindful Innovator, is there has to be, through that process, collaboration, right? There has to be input from a diverse set of ideas and backgrounds. And then it also takes that connecting with the project manager, sort of connecting with the influencer in the company, the buy-in, right? I think the buy-in is so important because you could go on the quest, but without support,
Hmm.
if the stakeholders aren't getting support from the leadership team, then it's hard to have this collaboration. It's almost
Hmm.
like collaboration in a vacuum without the buy-in.
Yeah. That's interesting. So talking about like just getting to the influencer within the organization. So if you're trying to sell in, a whole new line of bread into a grocery store, how do you begin to find the influencer?
Yeah, exactly. So it always starts with the buyer, right? And I think on big projects or big changes in the category, it usually gets elevated to the next level. And so I think the top to top meetings are really great, right? If you have that relationship with your clients or customers or retailers where you could sit down with not only the buyer, the category manager, but also the director, the VP, and take it as high up as you could go. Because if there's buy-in there, and this really ties into the business model that is centralized, right? When there's a centralized business model, um, decisions happen slowly. So if you could take the shortcut and get that audience, or at least get the most influential person in that audience to sign off on it, I think everybody saves a lot of time.
Hmm. So if you were to give the audience a couple of tidbits of advice, how do they influence an influencer?
Influence and influencer. Number one, logic. Number two, know their business as well as they do, and provide the solutions that maybe they're already thinking of, right? It's sort of mirroring the two ideas. If you understand their business, you understand their category, you understand that the end user, the shopper who's looking at a shelf or maybe coming into the department, and you understand their needs, and you could speak to those needs with the same language and back it up with data, I think that's the fastest way to influence the influencer, right?
Yeah, that
Speak
makes
their
a lot of sense.
language. Yeah.
Mhm. Yes.
Almost take a consultative role.
That's I love that. I love that like pivot from hey, I'm sales into that, consultant role to where I'm going to help you.
Yeah,
I'm here to champion you. So I love
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Well, we talked quite a bit about my book. I want to talk about your book. I mean, I've been
Sure.
staring at over your shoulder this whole time, and I see underdog, and I
Yes.
know the title of your book, "The Pen of an Underdog."
Yep.
Tell me a little bit more about what that is behind you and about your book journey, please.
Yeah, for sure. So here's my book. Oh, I always dislike moments like this, Matt, because I think I'm wearing the same suit that's on the cover of my book.
That's
Rerun.
great.
There's my rerun. But yeah, absolutely. So I wrote the book, The Pen of an Underdog, and it was sort of, it's about my career within my career, but I got to a point where through mindfulness, there's always something that's in each person. Each person can bring something to the world, to their industry, whatever that is. So I decided one day that I was going to be an author, and I just couldn't believe it. I never thought that I would be able to become an author, and I ended up writing my book in 30 days. And here's how I did it. So I went on this discovery of self, right? So my career was in a good place. Had a lot of contacts, had great teams, led great teams. I had great leaders that I reported to that taught me so much. And I just wanted to pivot, and take a little personality outside of the industry. And so I started doing some research and found out that the average book is between 60,000 and 90,000 words, right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to kind of shoot high, right? I'm going to take the staircase to the moon, or maybe the rocket to the moon. And every day, and I'm not a morning person, I woke up at 4 a.m. and I committed to writing 3,000 words a day for 30 days to get to 90,000 words. And so like at the end of the 30 days, I think I had 98,000 words or so. So pretty close to 100,000 words. And then I published my first book. The sign behind me is basically the prologue. Let me grab it. So The underdog, and I'll read
Nice.
this if I could just read this quickly.
Please.
Um, so the background of the underdog is it's what people would understand in business as imposter syndrome. It's been a word that's been kicked around, and when I started getting into leadership and leading teams, I always felt somewhat of an imposter syndrome, which I call an underdog. And the underdog kind of ties in my story, from the south side of Chicago and grew up in the working class, first person in my family to go to college. And I just guess I never felt good enough. So when I wrote the book, I kind of wrote the prologue as this. I'm going to read it real quick. If you don't mind, I'll read it fast.
No, take your time. I want people to digest this.
Yeah. So it's the story of the underdog. So the underdog doesn't feel shame or guilt in the title underdog. Instead, it's like being knighted in the underworld while training for the other world. Labeled as an underdog hints at higher potential and has sweet notes of greatness undiscovered. The fire of heart burns and the smoke sends warning signals to the opponents with better odds. The eye is watchful and focused on the final goal. The underdog.
Nice. That is a great definition for it, and I love that that switch of going from where it's imposter syndrome, and to this underdog like kind of language. So I think it's great.
Yeah.
So you said you took the moon to write this. You took the rocket to get to the moon to write this book, and I disagree. You did take the staircase. I think you shot high for sure in saying I'm going to write this book that's 90,000 words, and I'm going to do it in 30 days. You're crazy. But then you said, okay, well, I'm going to put some I'm going to put some steps in between, right? I'm going to do this 3,000 a day. You just walked one step every single day right to the moon. And nailed it. So great work, Ray. I mean, I'm really proud of this book and everything that you've done. This is really awesome work to be able to balance this out with being an SVP of a company in the manufacturing business. It's pretty big. A lot going on.
No, I love how you said the staircase, because you're right. And on that staircase, some days the stairs were damaged. They were some made noise, some were uneven. Because out of those 30 days, there were some days where I struggled. I struggled, with writer's block. I struggled with doubt. I struggled with, do I just give up? Mm-hmm. And so I like that analogy, the staircase. It definitely was a staircase. Yeah.
So those days of like doubt and like, I'm just going to throw this talent on this. Like what kept you from doing that?
I think in all, and when I talk about the food industry, is that passion for food, that passion for people and how they're interconnected. And so when I went on the journey to become an author, I took a lot of time to brainstorm myself, figure out who I truly was. And when I did that, I did it without precision, and I did it without permission, meaning I was going to be unfiltered and authentic to myself. And so that's what kept me going. Is out of all the things, I could have decided to take my efforts to be a candle maker, an entrepreneur, a senator, whatever that is, an artist. And I took a lot of time and found that through brainstorming and, of course, being mindful, I'll share a little bit about that too, is that's what kept me going. That was the fuel to my fire. That was it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I remember being mindful. So at the time I wrote the book, I was somewhat in between. I was in between careers, and I decided I was going to take 2 months, and I was going to, ready for this, Matt? I was going to be mindful for 2 months, because it's something I had never done on a continued basis. I would take 10 minutes here and there throughout my day to decompress. But as far as really taking time to be mindful long term, and I remember I would sit there, and it was very awkward for me at first. It was like sitting alone in silence without email chatter and without the cell phone ringing, and really just cutting the cord and sitting there in silence and meditating. At first, it's a daunting task.
It's a daunting task to do nothing. I
Do
totally
nothing.
agree. Like want to check your cell phone, like someone's got to be
Something.
messaging me or something.
And that was the thing. I'm like, I'm sitting here. I'm like, I'm not getting anything done. I should be working on my resume, networking, this, that, or another. And I was
Mm,
like, you know what? Like, I'm going to do this with purpose. I'm going to sit in silence. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to be calm. Right.
mm,
And it took a lot of getting used to. I'll be honest. It took a lot of getting used to. And so I started that journey and really self discovered, right? Self
mm,
discovered, which I did throughout my career is, every time I had an opportunity to move up in my career is I really took it seriously. I just wasn't chasing titles or money. I wanted to do it for the right reason. I wanted to lead people because I felt that through my experience and knowledge and having good leaders, what they taught me, I could share, right?
mm.
And so I think it just came from a good place, an authentic place, a selfless place.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the 2 months. So you talk about being mindful for 2 months. Like what spurred that exactly? Like why did you think that mindfulness is what you needed at that moment?
My mind was buzzing. It was overstimulated and I was burnt out, right?
Mm,
There comes a time where sometimes values don't align, and at the time my values didn't align with what I was doing, and I still had to show up and do my best because I mean obviously I owed it to my team, I owed it to the organization, even if they were going in a different direction. I owed it to them, and in the process I think I gave a little too much of myself, and I would say my values were exploited, which is there's some pain there. There's some pain and some learning there. And so I just really needed to slow down my mind, which for a long time was on rapid fire, deadlines, meetings, sales goals, managing people. And it just all became a lot. So in that 2 months to hit the slow down switch and eventually hit the off switch and pivot and think about greener pastures, who I am, what do I do. I love the food industry. I knew that I still wanted to be in the food industry, and I found a company I absolutely love. They're a privately owned, family owned company, amazing people, great products. So through that I found my next career trajectory, and I also found a little myself.
nice. Yeah, and if you were just, going rapid fire, this opportunity that kind of almost found you probably would have just gone by without even noticing.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
being able to take that breath and actually just kind of zen out for some time gives you that new perspective and
Yes.
relit the fire. It seems like for you.
We relit the fire. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was alignment, right? There was an alignment in purpose. Once again, there was alignment in
Mm,
shared passion, collaboration. Um, and that's what I say. If passion and purpose and authenticity, it cannot be bought and it cannot be borrowed, right? You companies and people, they either have it or they don't. And I landed in a very, very good place with passionate people, passion for food, passion for food service, passion for retail, grocery retail. And so, yeah, it's a really good place.
so what's like the mindfulness practice like for you today?
Yeah, for sure. Again, it's going back, and the food industry tends to present fire drills every day, right? If you're driving on the highway and you see all those trucks moving and going and stopping, and you think about the amount of food that's on a Cisco truck or US Foods truck or a Kroger truck or a Publix truck, sometimes those trucks break down. Sometimes appointments are missed. Sometimes, especially in fresh food, product consistency there's some variables. And so managing all that it takes mindfulness to understand that, not to take anything personally, right?
Mm,
Is that solving problems and collaborating is going to take calmness, right?
that's awesome and something everyone should take away from this conversation right there. It's not personal, right? When there's a fire happening at work, it's not because of you and what you've done. It's not personal. It's just there's a problem that needs to be solved. And if we can pull out that emotion from it and just be present in the moment and work on a solution rather than worrying about, I didn't like the way that Ray said that to me, and just, no, you know what? That was the problem. He may have been able to say it better, but it's okay. I understand what he's saying now. I can go and fix it. We can go and fix it and get to that solution. That's a great way to apply mindfulness in the daily life. And I love that you went in that direction rather than just saying, I sit in the corner for 10 minutes a day. That's how it's in action, in action in the food business, where you're using mindfulness to keep the business moving forward.
You got to keep it moving forward. And that's the thing too, is like usually the higher up or the more responsibility is that mindset is crucial for success. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amen. So definitely mindfulness can help you move yourself up in the company, help you solve those, make those solutions happen within the company, and it can help you innovate in the company as well.
Yes. Yes.
Ray, thank you so much for being on this episode. We definitely need to do this again. I want to dive even deeper into process and innovation and things that are going on in the industry. We have so much more to talk about. So I definitely do see a series coming here if you allow it.
Matt, it's a lot of fun, to be honest. Thank you for having me, and to be able to talk to, somebody in the industry that's taken a specialized approach to innovation. It's an honor. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Ray. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. That concludes our episode of Innovate on Purpose today. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some really great insights here. I know I'm pulling out quite a few nuggets, so be on the lookout for the article that's going to go along with this podcast to showcase those nuggets. And also look in the show notes for The Pen of an Underdog to get that on Amazon. It's definitely a great book to get. Get the book, and also please give it a review. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see you next time.
We have made it to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of things before you go. If you have found value in this episode, I am sure you'll find value in what we have coming up. So please subscribe so you will have access and know when we launch the next episode. Also, leave a review. The more reviews we have, the further our reach becomes, and I truly want this to be heard by as many leaders as possible. Don't hog this all for yourself. I would love to hear your insights on this topic, so meet me on social media at Matt Mueller Innovation on LinkedIn and Instagram. And lastly, if you want to learn more about my story and what I can do for you and your company, go to themindfulinnovator.com. I would love to help you innovate on purpose. Until next time, just remember, bring a level of awareness to each conversation, each observation, each moment, and you can create great change in this world. Thank you.